Break the loop of fake fears. Take back control of your mind. Today there is a moment, quiet and almost imperceptible, when something inside you begins to fracture. It is not dramatic. There is no external crisis, no visible collapse. It is subtler than that. It is the growing suspicion that the voice guiding your life may not be guiding you at all. That the constant stream of thoughts you have trusted for years might not be wisdom, but repetition. You start to notice patterns. The same fears appearing in different situations. The same hesitation dressed in new justifications. The same internal resistance every time you approach something meaningful. And what once felt like caution begins to feel like limitation. What once felt like intelligence begins to feel like avoidance. Your mind speaks with certainty. It tells you to wait, to prepare more, to think it through again. It presents itself as rational, as protective, as necessary. But if you observe carefully, you will see that it rarely leads you forward. It keeps you where you are, safe, predictable, unchanged. And here lies the paradox that few people ever confront. Your brain is not designed to make you fulfilled. It is designed to make you survive. It does not measure success in growth, but in familiarity. If something feels known, it feels safe. Even if that familiarity is built on stress, self-doubt, or silent frustration. From a neurological perspective, this makes perfect sense. Your brain conserves energy by repeating patterns. Neural pathways that are used frequently become stronger, faster, more automatic. What you think repeatedly becomes easier to think again. What you feel repeatedly becomes easier to feel again. Over time, your inner world becomes a closed circuit, feeding itself. And within that circuit, fear becomes efficient. The body does not distinguish well between real and imagined threats. When a thought triggers uncertainty, the amygdala activates. Cortisol is released, your heart rate shifts, your breathing changes, your focus narrows. The experience is physical, immediate, convincing. Even if nothing is happening outside you, something is happening within you. And so you react, you avoid, you postpone, you retreat slightly. And in that moment, something crucial happens. The discomfort decreases, relief appears. And with that relief comes a subtle reward. Dopamine reinforces the behavior. The brain learns that avoiding the situation solved the problem, but it did not solve the problem. It strengthened the loop. This is how invisible prisons are built. Not through force, but through repetition. Not through external limitation, but through internal agreement. Over time, the loop becomes so familiar that it feels like identity. You begin to believe that you are an anxious person, a cautious person, an overthinking person. But what you call personality may simply be pattern. Descartes once argued that if you wish to find truth, you must doubt everything that can be doubted. Yet most people never apply this to their own thoughts. They question the world, but they do not question the voice interpreting the world. What if that voice is not a source of truth, but a mechanism of preservation? What if it is not trying to elevate you, but to contain you within what is already known? This is the moment where everything can begin to change. Not when the world shifts, but when your relationship with your own mind shifts. When you stop accepting every thought as instruction. When you begin to observe instead of obey. Because once you see the loop, you cannot return to blindness. And once you understand that your mind can mislead you, you gain the possibility of something rare. You gain the possibility of control. The moment you realize your mind is not on your side. There comes a point where the illusion starts to crack, not loudly, but persistently. You begin to sense that something is off. The thoughts that once felt like guidance begin to feel like resistance. The voice that once sounded like reason begins to sound like repetition. At first it is subtle, a hesitation that appears too quickly, a doubt that feels disproportionate, a sense of tension in situations that do not justify it. You tell yourself it is normal. You tell yourself it is caution. But if you pay attention, you will notice that it follows a pattern. The same type of thoughts, returning in different contexts. The same conclusions, regardless of the situation. The same internal script, playing with minor variations. It tells you not to act yet, not to risk yet, not to move yet. Always later, always after more preparation, always after more certainty. But certainty never arrives. This is where the realization begins to deepen. You are not dealing with rational analysis. You are dealing with a system that prioritizes predictability over progress. Your brain has learned through repetition that the unknown is a threat, and it responds accordingly. The amygdala does not wait for evidence. It reacts to possibility. The moment uncertainty appears, your body begins to prepare for danger. Cortisol rises, your muscles tense, your breathing becomes shallow. The experience is immediate and convincing. It feels real because your body is involved. And then comes the most deceptive part. When you step back from the situation, when you choose not to act, the discomfort decreases, your system calms down, and your brain interprets this as success. Dopamine is released, reinforcing the behavior. The message becomes clear at a biological level. Avoidance worked. But what actually happened is that fear was rewarded. This creates a powerful loop. The more you avoid, the more your brain associates avoidance with safety. The more it associates action with threat. Over time, the threshold for what feels dangerous becomes lower. Situations that once felt neutral begin to feel intimidating. Your world begins to shrink, not because reality changed, but because your perception did. And this is where the most unsettling realization emerges. Many of your thoughts are not guiding you toward truth. They are guiding you toward what is familiar. They are not asking what is possible. They are asking what is safe. And safety in this context often means staying within the limits you have already experienced. You begin to see that your thoughts are not always aligned with your goals. You want to grow, but your mind tells you to stay. You want to move forward, but your mind suggests waiting. You want change, but your mind prioritizes stability. There is a conflict. And for the first time, you recognize that the voice in your head is not necessarily you. It is a process, a collection of learned patterns, reinforced over time, executed automatically. It feels personal, but it is mechanical. This realization changes everything. Because once you stop identifying completely with your thoughts, you create distance. And in that distance, something new becomes possible. You can observe, you can question, you can interrupt. Instead of reacting immediately, you begin to pause. You notice the thought instead of becoming it. You see the fear instead of obeying it. You recognize the pattern instead of repeating it blindly. This is not the end of fear, it is the end of unconscious submission to it. And that is the first real step toward control. The silent agreement you made with fear. At some point in your life, without ceremony and without awareness, you made an agreement. Not a conscious decision, not something you remember choosing, but a silent contract formed through repetition. A contract where fear was given authority. It did not happen all at once. It happened in small moments. A time you held back and felt relief. A time you avoided discomfort and felt safe. A time you listened to doubt and nothing bad happened. Each of these moments reinforced the same message. Fear protects you. Fear knows better. And slowly, without noticing, you stopped questioning it. This is how conditioning works. The brain does not need logic to learn, it needs patterns. When a behavior reduces discomfort, it is marked as useful. When avoiding something makes you feel better, even temporarily, your brain encodes that as a strategy worth repeating. Over time, fear stops being a signal and becomes a guide. You begin to organize your life around it, not explicitly but subtly. You choose the safer option. You delay the uncomfortable conversation. You stay within what feels manageable. And each time you do, the agreement deepens. From a neurological perspective, this agreement is reinforced through the reward system. When you avoid a perceived threat, dopamine is released as a form of relief. That relief feels like success. It feels like you made the right choice, but what you actually did was strengthen the association between fear and safety. This is where the illusion becomes dangerous, because fear is not always accurate. It is based on past experiences, incomplete information, and sometimes pure imagination. Yet your brain treats it as a reliable advisor. Not because it is correct, but because it has been consistent. The more consistent a signal is, the more trustworthy it feels. And so you begin to follow it automatically. You do not ask whether the fear is valid. You ask how to avoid what it is pointing to. You do not examine the thought, you react to it. This is the silent agreement. You gave fear the role of decision maker, and once fear occupies that role, your world begins to organize itself around limitation. Not because you lack ability, but because your actions are filtered through avoidance. Opportunities are dismissed before they are explored. Possibilities are reduced before they are tested. The Stoics understood something critical about this. They did not try to eliminate fear. They questioned its authority. Marcus Aurelius wrote about observing impressions before accepting them. Not every thought deserves obedience. Not every internal signal deserves action. But this requires awareness. Because the agreement you made with fear is invisible until you look at it directly. It hides behind rationalizations. It disguises itself as logic. It tells you that you are being careful, responsible, realistic. And in some cases, that may be true. But in many cases, it is simply repetition wearing the mask of reason. The deeper problem is not fear itself. The deeper problem is that you stopped evaluating it. You stopped asking whether it is useful, whether it is accurate, whether it is aligned with the life you want to build. Instead, you accepted it as part of your operating system. And here is the consequence. When fear becomes your guide, growth becomes a threat. Because growth requires uncertainty. It requires stepping into situations where the outcome is not guaranteed. And if your system interprets uncertainty as danger, you will resist the very experiences that would expand you. This is why people remain stuck even when they know what they should do. Knowledge is not enough. If fear holds authority, action will always be delayed. But the moment you recognize the agreement, something changes. You begin to see that fear is not a command. It is a suggestion, a signal generated by a system trying to protect you based on past patterns. It may be useful in some contexts, but it is not universally correct. And that realization weakens the contract. Because an agreement only holds power while it remains unquestioned. The moment you bring it into awareness, the moment you examine it, you begin to take back authority. You do not need to eliminate fear. You need to reposition it, from leader to informant, from controller to observer. And once that shift begins, the loop starts to loosen. Why your brain repeats what hurts you. There is something deeply counterintuitive about the human mind. It does not avoid what hurts you. It repeats what is familiar, even when that familiarity is the source of your suffering. At first glance, this seems irrational. Why would you continue thinking thoughts that create anxiety, doubt, or hesitation? Why would your system return to patterns that limit you? The answer is not found in logic. It is found in efficiency. Your brain is an organ designed to conserve energy. It builds pathways based on repetition, not based on what is best for you. The more a thought is used, the stronger the neural circuit becomes. The stronger the circuit, the easier it is to activate again. Over time, thinking becomes automatic. This is how loops are formed. A thought appears. It triggers an emotion. That emotion influences your behavior, and your behavior reinforces the original thought. Each cycle strengthens the pathway. Each repetition makes it more likely to happen again. The brain does not evaluate whether the pattern is beneficial. It evaluates whether the pattern is consistent. Consistency becomes truth. This is why you can know something consciously and still act in contradiction to it. You may understand that a fear is irrational, but your body reacts anyway. You may want to move forward, but something inside you resists. That resistance is not weakness. It is conditioning. From a neurological standpoint, what you are experiencing is the dominance of established circuits over new ones. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning and decision-making, may recognize opportunity, but the limbic system, shaped by past repetition, signals threat, and in moments of uncertainty, the older system often wins. Because it is faster. The brain prioritizes speed over accuracy when it comes to survival. If something feels even slightly similar to a past negative experience, it reacts as if the threat is present again. It does not wait for confirmation. It assumes. And this assumption becomes your reality. Now consider what happens when you repeatedly avoid discomfort. Each time you do, you strengthen the pathway that associates avoidance with relief. Dopamine is released, reinforcing the behavior. The brain learns that stepping back is rewarding, but here is the paradox. The more you avoid what challenges you, the more sensitive your system becomes to challenge. Your tolerance decreases, your threshold lowers. Situations that once felt manageable begin to feel overwhelming. This is not because you became weaker, it is because the loop became stronger, and so the cycle continues. You feel discomfort, you avoid, you experience relief. The brain reinforces the pattern. Next time, the discomfort arrives faster and stronger. You avoid again, and the loop tightens. This is how people become trapped in patterns they consciously want to escape. Not because they lack willpower, but because their system has been trained to repeat. The philosopher Aristotle observed that we are what we repeatedly do. But this extends deeper than behavior. You are what you repeatedly think. You are what you repeatedly feel. Your internal patterns shape your external reality. And if those patterns are built on fear, hesitation, and avoidance, your life begins to reflect that structure. The critical insight here is this: your brain is not trying to harm you, it is trying to be efficient. It repeats what it knows, it strengthens what it uses, it defaults to what has been reinforced. Which means that change is not about forcing yourself to think differently once. It is about interrupting the pattern repeatedly until a new pathway becomes stronger than the old one. But to do that, you must first recognize the loop while it is happening. You must catch the moment where the thought appears, where the emotion begins, where the impulse to avoid arises. Not after the fact, but in real time. Because the loop only holds power when it runs unconsciously. The moment you see it, you introduce something new into the system, awareness. And awareness slows the automatic response. It creates a gap between stimulus and action. In that gap, you have a choice: to repeat the pattern or to begin rewriting it, the chemical illusion of threat. What you feel in moments of fear is not just a thought. It is a full-body event, a cascade of chemical signals that convince you something is wrong, even when nothing is happening. This is where the illusion becomes powerful. Your brain does not simply think fear, it manufactures it. The moment uncertainty is detected, the amygdala sends a rapid signal through your nervous system. Cortisol is released, preparing your body for action. Your heart rate increases, your breathing shortens, your muscles tighten. The body enters a state of alert before the mind has time to question it. And because the body reacts first, the mind follows. You interpret the physical sensation as confirmation. If your heart is racing, something must be wrong. If your chest feels tight, something must be dangerous. The feeling becomes evidence, even if the original trigger was only a thought. This is the chemical illusion. Your system creates a physiological state, and then your mind builds a narrative to justify it. Not because it is accurate, but because the brain seeks coherence. It wants your internal experience to make sense, even if the explanation is incomplete. Dopamine plays a more subtle role in this process. It is not only the neurotransmitter of pleasure, but also of anticipation and learning. When you avoid a situation that triggered discomfort, dopamine reinforces the behavior. It marks avoidance as successful. So the next time a similar thought appears, your system is already biased toward retreat. At the same time, serotonin, which helps regulate mood and emotional stability, can become dysregulated when you remain in cycles of stress and avoidance. The more unstable your internal state becomes, the more sensitive you are to perceived threats. This creates a loop where your chemistry supports your fear and your fear reinforces your chemistry. From the outside, nothing has changed. But inside, your system is reacting as if it has. This is why imagined scenarios can feel as intense as real ones. The brain does not fully distinguish between a vividly constructed thought and an actual event. If the image is clear enough, if the emotion is strong enough, the body responds as if it is happening now. And so you suffer in advance. You rehearse outcomes that have not occurred. You experience stress for situations that may never exist. And each time you do, you strengthen the association between thought and reaction. The Stoics recognized this long before neuroscience could explain it. They observed that people are disturbed not by events, but by their interpretation of events. Today, we can see the biological layer beneath that observation. The interpretation triggers chemistry. The chemistry reinforces the interpretation, and the cycle continues. The critical realization here is that your feelings are not always reliable indicators of truth. They are often reflections of internal processes, shaped by past experiences and reinforced by repetition. This does not mean you should ignore them. It means you should understand them, because when you understand that your body can generate the sensation of fear without real danger, you begin to separate the signal from the meaning. You begin to see that intensity does not equal accuracy. And in that separation, something shifts. You stop reacting to every sensation as if it were a command. You begin to observe the process itself, the rise of tension, the change in breathing, the impulse to withdraw. You recognize it as a pattern, not as proof. And once again, awareness interrupts the loop, because the power of the illusion depends on your belief in it. The moment you question it, the chemistry may still arise, but its authority begins to weaken. You feel it, but you do not automatically obey it, and that is the beginning of mastery. When imagination becomes authority, there is a point where thought stops being a tool and starts becoming a ruler, not because it was designed to lead, but because it was never questioned. Your imagination, which should serve creativity and possibility, begins to dictate reality. You start to notice that many of your reactions are not based on what is happening, but on what could happen. You simulate conversations that have not occurred. You anticipate outcomes that have no evidence. You construct entire scenarios in your mind and then respond to them as if they were real, and the body follows. The same neural circuits activated by real experiences are triggered by vivid imagination. The brain does not wait for reality to confirm the threat. It reacts to the image. It reacts to the prediction. And once again, your system enters a state of alert. This is where imagination gains authority. Not because it is accurate, but because it is convincing. Descartes insisted on radical doubt as a path to truth. He questioned everything that could be questioned, including the reliability of perception. But most people never apply that same scrutiny to their own thoughts. They accept internal narratives without examination. A thought appears, and it is treated as fact. But a thought is not a fact. It is a construction. When imagination becomes authority, you no longer act based on reality. You act based on projections, and projections are shaped by past experiences, emotional memory, and learned patterns. If your past reinforced fear, your imagination will reproduce it. You begin to live in anticipation instead of presence. From a neurological perspective, this is the brain trying to predict and control uncertainty. It runs simulations to prepare you. But when those simulations are dominated by negative bias, they become limiting rather than useful. The brain prefers to overestimate danger rather than underestimate it. This bias was once essential for survival, but in a modern context, it often becomes a source of unnecessary suffering. You prepare for rejection before speaking. You expect failure before trying. You assume judgment before expressing yourself. And each of these imagined outcomes influences your behavior. You hold back. You hesitate. You adjust yourself to avoid something that does not yet exist. Over time, imagination stops being a possibility generator and becomes a restriction mechanism. And the most dangerous part is that it feels rational, because your mind provides reasons. It builds arguments. It connects past experiences to future predictions. It creates a narrative that appears coherent, but coherence is not the same as truth. The mind is capable of building convincing illusions. The Stoics warned about this tendency. They emphasized the importance of separating impressions from judgments. An impression is automatic. A judgment is a choice. But when imagination dominates, the two merge. You no longer distinguish between what arises and what you accept. Everything becomes immediate belief. This is why awareness is not enough at a superficial level. You must go deeper. You must question not only the content of your thoughts, but the authority you give them. Ask yourself, is this happening, or am I imagining it? Is this evidence, or is this prediction? Is this reality, or is this memory projected forward? These questions begin to break the automatic chain, because once imagination loses its unquestioned authority, it returns to its proper role, a tool. Something you can use, not something that uses you. And when that shift occurs, your world begins to change. Not because reality changed, but because you stopped reacting to illusions as if they were real. The identity built around avoidance. There is a deeper layer beneath your thoughts, beneath your reactions, beneath even your habits. It is the place where repetition becomes identity. And this is where fear becomes most difficult to break. At first, avoidance is just a behavior. You hesitate, you step back, you delay. It feels temporary, situational. But the brain does not store it that way. It begins to organize patterns. It looks for consistency. And once a pattern repeats enough times, it stops being something you do and starts becoming something you believe you are. You no longer say, I avoided that situation. You begin to say, I am not confident. I am an anxious person. I am someone who overthinks. This is the shift. A behavior becomes a label becomes an identity, and identity is powerful because it shapes what you believe is possible. From a cognitive perspective, this is where thought and self-concept merge. Your brain seeks coherence between who you think you are and how you act. So once you adopt an identity, your system begins to act in ways that confirm it. If you believe you are someone who struggles with fear, your attention will naturally focus on evidence that supports that belief. You will notice the moments of hesitation more than the moments of courage. You will remember the times you held back more than the times you moved forward. And this selective attention reinforces the identity. Neurologically, this process is efficient. The brain creates shortcuts. Instead of evaluating every situation from scratch, it relies on established self-concepts to guide behavior. This reduces cognitive load, but it also reduces possibility, because if your identity is built around avoidance, then action becomes a contradiction. Growth becomes uncomfortable, not only physically, but psychologically. It challenges who you believe yourself to be, and the mind resists that. This is why change feels so difficult. Not because the actions themselves are impossible, but because they conflict with your internal narrative. You are not just trying to do something new, you are trying to become someone different. The Stoics understood this in a different language. They spoke about character as something shaped through repeated choices, not something fixed, but something built. Aristotle reinforced this idea by emphasizing that excellence is not an act, but a habit. But here is the problem. If your habits have been built around avoidance, then your identity reflects that structure. And without awareness, you will continue to reinforce it automatically. You will avoid, then justify. You will hesitate, then explain. You will step back, then label yourself accordingly, and each cycle strengthens the identity. The critical insight is this: you are not your patterns. You are the one repeating them. This distinction is subtle, but it changes everything. Because if you are your patterns, then you are fixed. But if you are the one repeating them, then you can choose differently. Not instantly, not perfectly, but deliberately. Breaking this identity does not require a dramatic transformation. It requires small contradictions, moments where you act in a way that does not align with the old pattern. Moments where you move despite hesitation. Moments where you speak despite doubt. Each of these actions introduces new evidence into your system. And evidence is what reshapes identity. From a neuroplasticity standpoint, every time you act against an old pattern, you weaken its pathway and begin strengthening a new one. It is not immediate, it is not linear, but it is real. Over time, the identity begins to shift, not through affirmation, but through experience. You stop saying, "I am someone who avoids," and you begin to notice, "I am someone who acts, even when it is uncomfortable." That is how identity evolves, not by thinking differently, but by behaving differently long enough for the brain to update its model of who you are. And once that model changes, the loop begins to lose its foundation. The disconnection between thought and reality. There is a subtle but critical divide that most people never fully recognize. The difference between what is happening and what you think is happening. And in that gap, entire lives are shaped. You wake up, and before anything external occurs, your mind is already active, interpreting, predicting, judging. It does not wait for reality to unfold. It constructs a version of it in advance. And then, without noticing, you begin to live inside that version. This is where the disconnection begins. A thought arises, and instead of being observed, it is accepted. It carries weight, authority, and urgency. But a thought is not an event. It is a representation, often incomplete, often distorted, shaped by memory and expectation. Yet your system reacts as if it were real. Descartes understood this deeply. He questioned not only the world, but the mechanisms through which the world is perceived. He recognized that perception can deceive, that certainty must be built through examination, not assumption. But in daily life, this level of scrutiny disappears. You assume that what you think reflects what is. You assume that your interpretation is accurate. And because of that, your reactions are based not on reality, but on perception filtered through past conditioning. From a neurological standpoint, the brain operates as a prediction machine. It constantly generates models of what it expects to happen based on prior experience. These predictions are faster than conscious awareness. They shape how you interpret incoming information. This means you rarely see reality as it is. You see it as you expect it to be. If your past has reinforced fear, your predictions will lean toward threat. If your experiences have been marked by hesitation, your interpretations will favor caution. The brain fills gaps with familiar patterns, not necessarily with accurate ones. And so the loop continues. You think something negative will happen. Your body reacts. Your perception narrows. You interpret neutral signals as confirmation, and your belief strengthens. But nothing external may have justified it. This is the disconnection. The internal narrative becomes more influential than external reality. The Stoics approached this with precision. They taught that between an impression and a response, there is a space. In that space lies judgment, and judgment determines whether the impression becomes suffering. But most people collapse that space. The thought appears, and the reaction follows instantly. There is no pause, no questioning, no separation. The loop runs without interruption. To break it, you must restore the distinction. You must begin to see thoughts as events within the mind, not as direct reflections of the world. You must recognize that a feeling of fear does not confirm danger, that a prediction does not guarantee outcome, that an interpretation is not the same as truth. This requires practice. You notice the thought as it arises, not after it has taken control, but in the moment it begins. You observe it without immediately acting on it. You create distance, and in that distance, something becomes clear. Reality is often quieter than your mind makes it, less threatening, less dramatic, less certain. The urgency you feel is frequently generated internally, not externally. This realization is not meant to disconnect you from your experience. It is meant to refine it. Because once you separate thought from reality, you regain the ability to respond instead of react. You begin to align your actions with what is actually happening, not with what your mind predicts. And that alignment changes everything. The loop weakens, not because the thoughts disappear, but because they lose their unquestioned authority. You still think, you still feel, but you are no longer automatically controlled by either. And that is where clarity begins. The disconnection between thought and reality. There is a gap that most people never notice, yet it defines the quality of their entire life. It is the space between what is happening and what you think is happening. And in that space, your suffering is often created. You experience a situation, something simple, neutral, unfinished, but almost instantly your mind interprets it. It adds meaning, predicts outcomes, assigns intentions, and within seconds, you are no longer responding to reality. You are responding to your interpretation of it. This is the disconnection. Reality is immediate, direct, limited to what exists. Thought is expansive, associative, influenced by memory and emotion. When the two merge without awareness, your internal world begins to distort what is external. Descartes questioned the reliability of perception because he understood that the mind can deceive. Not intentionally, but structurally. It fills gaps. It completes patterns. It seeks coherence, even if that coherence is built on assumption rather than fact. And this is where fear finds space to grow, because fear does not require reality. It requires interpretation. A delayed response becomes rejection. A challenge becomes threat. Uncertainty becomes danger. None of these are inherent in the situation itself. They are constructed by the mind in its attempt to predict and control. From a neurological perspective, this process is efficient. The brain uses past experiences to interpret present stimuli. It builds shortcuts to respond quickly. But these shortcuts are not always accurate. They are biased by what you have lived, what you have felt, and what has been repeated. So the mind does not show you reality. It shows you a version of reality filtered through your history. And if your history is marked by fear, hesitation, or doubt, that filter becomes restrictive. you begin to see limitations where there may be none. You begin to anticipate outcomes that have no evidence. You begin to react to situations that have not yet unfolded. And slowly, your life becomes shaped not by what is real, but by what is perceived. The Stoics addressed this with clarity. They separated events from judgments. An event is what happens. A judgment is what you add to it. The problem is that most people do not see the difference. The judgment feels immediate, inseparable, true. But it is not. It is constructed. This is where awareness becomes essential, not as a concept, but as a practice. You begin to observe your thoughts as they arise. You notice how quickly they attach meaning. You see how easily they turn uncertainty into narrative. And in that observation, something subtle but powerful occurs. You create distance. You begin to realize that a thought about something is not the same as the thing itself, that a prediction is not an outcome, that a feeling is not a fact. This separation weakens the automatic reaction, because once you see that your mind is interpreting rather than reflecting, you gain the ability to question it. Not aggressively, not forcefully, but precisely. Is this actually happening, or am I adding to it? Is this evidence, or is this assumption? Is this reality, or is this memory shaping perception? These questions bring you back to what is real, back to what is present, back to what can actually be acted upon. And when you return to reality, fear begins to lose its excess. Because most fear is not rooted in what is happening now. It is rooted in what might happen, what could happen, what once happened. When you remove those layers, what remains is often far more manageable than the mind suggested. This is not about denying thought. It is about placing it in its proper position, a tool, not a lens that distorts everything you see. And once that clarity begins to develop, the loop loses another piece of its power, the body as the first battlefield. Before a thought fully forms, before you even have time to interpret what is happening, your body has already reacted. This is where most people lose control, not in the mind, but in the physiology that precedes it. You feel it instantly, a tightening in the chest, a subtle contraction in the stomach. Your breath becomes shorter, faster, less controlled. Your shoulders rise without permission, and suddenly, without any clear external threat, your entire system is preparing for something. This is not random. Your nervous system is scanning constantly, detecting patterns, anticipating outcomes. It does not wait for conscious confirmation. It reacts based on familiarity. If something resembles a past discomfort even slightly, the body begins to prepare as if the event is happening again. This is why fear feels so real, because it is not just in your head. It is in your muscles, your breath, your heart rate. It is embodied. Andrew Huberman explains this clearly. The body often leads the mind, not the other way around. Your physiological state shapes your perception. If your body is tense, your mind searches for a reason. If your breathing is unstable, your thoughts become unstable. The system seeks alignment. And so the narrative begins after the sensation. You feel something, then you think something to justify it. This is where the loop becomes difficult to break. Because by the time you are aware of the thought, the body is already in motion. The reaction feels justified, even if it was triggered automatically. Most people try to solve this at the level of thought. They try to think differently, to rationalize, to argue with their own mind. But they ignore the first battlefield, the body. If your physiology remains in a state of alert, your mind will continue to generate reasons to stay there. It will produce thoughts that match the state you are in. This is why controlling your mind requires learning to regulate your body. Your breath becomes a tool. Slow, controlled breathing signals safety to the nervous system. It reduces the intensity of the response. It creates space. Your posture matters. When your body is contracted, your perception narrows. When your body opens, your system receives a different signal. It begins to shift out of defense mode. Movement also plays a role. Remaining still while anxious often intensifies the loop. Intentional movement helps discharge the built-up energy, interrupting the cycle before it escalates. This is not abstract, it is biological. You are not just thinking your way into fear, you are feeling your way into it, and that means you must learn to feel your way out. The Stoics understood discipline, but modern neuroscience adds another layer. Control is not only about what you think, it is about how you regulate the system that produces those thoughts. When you begin to observe your body as the first signal, everything changes. You catch the tension earlier, you notice the shift in breathing, you recognize the pattern before it becomes overwhelming. And in that moment, you have leverage. Instead of being pulled into the loop, you intervene at its origin. You slow the breath, you relax the body, you create stability, and when the body stabilizes, the mind follows. Fear may still appear, but it no longer takes over instantly. It no longer escalates without resistance, because you have addressed it where it begins, not in the story, but in the system, and that is where real control starts to become possible. The habit of escaping yourself. There is a pattern so common that it has become invisible. You feel discomfort, and almost instantly you reach for something to escape it. Not consciously, not with intention, but automatically. You check your phone, you distract your attention, you shift your focus to something easier, faster, more stimulating. And within seconds, the discomfort fades, not because it was resolved, but because it was avoided. This is where the loop hides most effectively, because it does not feel like fear, it feels like normal behavior. But if you look closely, you will see the structure. Every time you feel internal tension, you move away from it. You replace stillness with stimulation. You replace awareness with distraction. And each time you do, your brain learns the same lesson. Discomfort should be escaped. From a neurological perspective, this is deeply tied to dopamine. Your brain is constantly seeking reward, novelty, and relief. When you shift your attention away from discomfort towards something stimulating, dopamine is released, not because the problem was solved, but because you changed your state. And that reward reinforces the behavior. Over time, this becomes a habit. Not just a behavior you occasionally engage in, but a default response. The moment something feels uncomfortable, your system searches for an exit. But here is the consequence. If you always escape discomfort, you never learn to tolerate it. If you never tolerate it, you never understand it. And if you never understand it, it continues to control you from the background. You become dependent on distraction. And the more you depend on it, the less capacity you have for focus, clarity, and depth. Your mind becomes fragmented, constantly shifting, unable to stay with a single thought or sensation for long enough to process it. This is not a lack of discipline. It is a trained response. The modern environment amplifies this pattern. Endless sources of stimulation, instant access to distraction, constant input. The system is designed to pull your attention outward, away from your internal state. But your internal state is where the loop exists. If you never sit with your thoughts, you never see their structure. If you never stay with discomfort, you never realize that it can pass without escape. If you never observe your reactions, you never interrupt them. You remain in motion, but without direction. The philosopher Montaigne spoke about the importance of examining oneself, of turning inward with honesty and curiosity. But this requires stillness, and stillness for many has become uncomfortable, because in stillness there is nothing to escape into, only what is already there. And that is where fear often reveals itself, not as something overwhelming, but as something persistent, a background tension, a subtle unease, something that has been avoided so many times that it feels unfamiliar to face directly. But this is also where change begins. When you stop escaping, even briefly, you start to see the pattern. You notice the urge to distract. You feel the pull towards stimulation. And instead of following it immediately, you pause. That pause is critical because it breaks the automatic sequence. It creates a moment where you are no longer reacting unconsciously. You are observing. And in that observation, you discover something important. The discomfort is not infinite. It rises, it peaks, and it falls. It moves, it changes. It is not as permanent or as threatening as it felt when you were running from it. This realization weakens the need to escape, because you begin to trust that you can stay, that you can experience the sensation without being overwhelmed, that you can remain present without needing immediate relief. And with that, your relationship with your own mind begins to shift. You are no longer constantly running from yourself. You are learning to face what is there, and that is where clarity starts to emerge. Rewriting the signal. Training the brain to feel safe again. Up to this point, you have seen the structure, the loop, the chemistry, the identity, the body, the escape. But awareness alone does not complete the process. It opens the door, but you still need to walk through it. Because your brain does not change through insight. It changes through repetition. Every pattern you have today was built the same way. Not in a single moment, but through consistent reinforcement. Which means that if fear has been trained into your system, safety must be trained back into it, not as an idea, but as an experience. The brain learns through evidence. It updates its predictions based on what you repeatedly do, not what you occasionally think. This is the principle of neuroplasticity. Circuits that are used become stronger. Circuits that are ignored begin to weaken. So the question is no longer why you feel fear. The question becomes what you are reinforcing. If every time discomfort appears, you step back, your brain learns that discomfort equals danger. But if you remain, even briefly, even imperfectly, you introduce a new signal. Discomfort does not mean stop. This is where the process becomes deliberate. You begin to interrupt the automatic response, not by eliminating fear, but by changing your behavior in its presence. You feel the tension, you notice the impulse to avoid, and instead of obeying it, you take a small action forward, not a dramatic leap, a precise movement. Because the brain does not require intensity to change, it requires consistency. Each time you act despite the discomfort, something shifts. The prediction of danger is challenged. The expected outcome does not occur. And slowly, the system begins to update. The amygdala reduces its reactivity. The prefrontal cortex gains influence. Your nervous system starts to recalibrate. But there is another layer. You must also learn to regulate your internal state while you act. If your body remains in high alert, your brain will continue to associate the experience with stress. But if you stabilize your breathing, your posture, your focus, you send a different message. This is safe enough. Andrew Huberman emphasizes that safety is not only a condition of the environment, it is a signal generated within the body. When your breath slows, when your gaze steadies, when your movements are controlled, your nervous system interprets this as reduced threat. And this changes how the brain encodes the experience. So now you are not only acting differently, you are feeling differently while acting. This combination is powerful because you are not forcing yourself through fear. You are retraining your system to reinterpret it. Joe Dispenza often speaks about the importance of creating new internal states that match the future you want to live. Not waiting for confidence to appear, but generating the conditions that allow it to emerge. And this is exactly what you are doing. You are teaching your brain that action does not lead to danger. That discomfort can be tolerated. That movement is possible even when certainty is absent. Over time, the signal changes. What once triggered hesitation begins to feel neutral. What once felt threatening begins to feel manageable, and eventually, what once stopped you begins to lose its influence. But this requires patience, because the old patterns were built over time, and they will not disappear instantly. They will reappear. They will attempt to pull you back into familiar responses. This is where discipline becomes essential, not rigid control, but consistent direction. Each time the loop begins, you respond differently. Each time the signal appears, you reinterpret it. Each time discomfort rises, you remain, and slowly the system reorganizes. The fear does not vanish completely, but it changes position. It is no longer leading. It is no longer deciding. It becomes something you can feel without being controlled by. And this is how the loop is rewritten, not through force, but through repeated evidence that a different response is possible. Becoming the observer instead of the reactor. There is a point in this process where something subtle but profound begins to emerge. You are no longer fully inside the experience. You are looking at it. The thought appears, but instead of pulling you immediately, you notice it. The sensation rises in your body, but instead of reacting instantly, you feel it without moving away. The impulse comes, but you do not obey it automatically. This is the shift. You are no longer only the one experiencing, you are also the one observing. And this changes the entire structure of your mind, because as long as you are fully identified with your thoughts, every idea feels like truth, every fear feels like reality, every impulse feels like a command. There is no distance, no space, no choice. There is only reaction. But the moment you become the observer, you create separation. A thought is no longer you. It is something you can see. A feeling is no longer something you must act on. It is something you can experience. An impulse is no longer an order. It is a signal you can evaluate. Descartes searched for certainty and found it not in the world, but in awareness itself. The fact that you can observe your thoughts means you are not your thoughts. There is something deeper, something stable, something capable of witnessing without being consumed. That is where control resides. From a neurological perspective, this shift activates different regions of the brain. Instead of being dominated by reactive circuits, you engage areas associated with awareness, regulation, and decision-making. The prefrontal cortex becomes more involved. The automatic loop slows down. This is not suppression, it is clarity. You are not trying to stop thoughts, you are seeing them as they are, and when you see clearly, the intensity changes. A fear that once felt overwhelming becomes a pattern you recognize. A doubt that once felt convincing becomes a familiar voice repeating itself. The urgency fades, not because the thought disappears, but because you are no longer inside it. The Stoics practiced this constantly. They trained themselves to observe impressions before reacting, to pause, to examine, to choose. Not because they lacked emotion, but because they understood that awareness creates freedom. Without awareness, there is no choice. With awareness, there is always a moment, even if brief, where you can decide. This is where mastery begins to take shape, not in eliminating fear, not in controlling every thought, but in changing your relationship with them. You no longer chase every idea. You no longer resist every sensation. You allow them to appear, to move, to pass. And in doing so, you remain stable. The observer is not disturbed in the same way the reactor is. The observer sees movement without becoming movement, sees tension without becoming tension, sees fear without becoming fear. This does not make you passive, it makes you precise. Because now your actions are not driven by automatic patterns, they are chosen. You act not because you were pushed by fear, but because you decided to move despite it. You speak not because the impulse forced you, but because you aligned with intention. And over time, this position becomes stronger. You spend less time inside the loop and more time observing it, less time reacting and more time choosing, less time being controlled and more time directing. This is the moment where control becomes real, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. You are no longer at the mercy of your mind. You are the one watching it, and that changes everything. The day you decide, fear no longer leads. There is no final moment where fear disappears completely. No sudden silence where the mind becomes perfectly still. That is not how this works. What changes is not the presence of fear, but its position in your life. There comes a day where something becomes clear with absolute precision. You see the loop, you understand the pattern, you recognize the voice, and more importantly, you realize that none of it has the authority you once gave it. That is the turning point. Not when you feel ready, but when you decide that readiness is no longer the condition for action. Not when fear is gone, but when fear is no longer the one making decisions. You feel the same sensations, the same tension may arise, the same thoughts may appear, repeating familiar narratives, but something is different now. You are not inside them in the same way. You are aware, grounded, present, and in that awareness, you choose. This is where identity fully shifts. You are no longer someone trying to eliminate fear. You are someone who moves with clarity despite it. You are no longer negotiating with hesitation. You are directing your actions based on intention. The brain begins to reflect this change. Each time you act in alignment with this decision, new evidence is created. The system updates. The pathways that once reinforced avoidance begin to weaken. The pathways that support action begin to strengthen. Dopamine is no longer tied to relief from avoidance. It becomes linked to movement, to progress, to engagement. Serotonin stabilizes as your internal state becomes less reactive. Your nervous system starts to trust a new pattern. Not because fear vanished, but because you stopped obeying it. The Stoics spoke of discipline as the foundation of freedom. Not freedom from challenge, but freedom from internal chaos. The ability to remain steady, to choose deliberately, to act with intention, regardless of what arises. And this is what you step into. You begin to live in alignment with what is real, not with what is imagined. You respond instead of react. You act instead of delay. You move instead of retreat. This is not dramatic, it is precise. Small decisions made consistently that redefine the direction of your life. You speak when you would have stayed silent. You act when you would have waited. You face what you would have avoided. And each of these moments reinforces the same truth. You are no longer controlled by the loop. Fear may still appear, but it no longer leads. And that is the difference between a life constrained by invisible patterns and a life directed by conscious choice. There is no external signal that confirms this shift. No announcement, no recognition. Only the quiet certainty that you have taken back something that was never meant to be lost. Control, not over the world, not over every outcome, but over your response to it. And once you have that, the loop no longer defines you. You define what comes next.